She was sold for wearing pants, until a cowboy said, "With me, she chooses." Amira woke before dawn, as she always did. The first rays of sunlight had not yet touched the dusty village roads, and the cool morning air carried the faint smell of smoke from nearby hearths. She pulled on her worn pants and a simple tunic, careful not to let the fabric crumple too much. Today, like every day, she would walk the narrow path to fetch water from the stream outside the village. Most girls her age wore long dresses, skirts that brushed the ground and hid their legs. Amira, however, had never been comfortable in a skirt. She liked the freedom pants gave her, the way she could run, climb, and move without feeling trapped. Her mother, a quiet woman with gentle eyes, had warned her many times. "Amira," she whispered, "you must be careful. People talk here. Even small acts can bring trouble." But Amira could not help herself. There was a fire inside her, a restless energy that refused to be hidden. The villagers were strict. They believed girls must follow rules without question. But rules, to Amira, were walls she had no choice but to try to climb. As she stepped out of the small courtyard of her home, the sun peeked over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The village was still waking. Smoke spiraled from chimneys, and the faint sound of roosters echoed through the dusty streets. Amira kept her head down, hoping to avoid attention. She knew the elders would frown upon her clothing, and gossip traveled faster than the wind. Still, she held her chin high. She had worn pants for as long as she could remember, and even now, the thought of hiding who she was felt wrong. The path to the stream was lined with old stone walls, crumbling from years of weather and neglect. Amira moved quickly, balancing her water jug on her hip. She could hear the chatter of other villagers as they began their morning routines. Women sweeping their doorsteps, men tending to animals, children laughing and chasing one another through narrow lanes. A dog barked in the distance, and a rooster crowed again, louder this time. The world was waking, but for Amira, there was a heaviness she could not shake. Only yesterday she had felt eyes on her. Whispers followed her as she walked past the market, people staring at her trousers and murmuring behind their hands. "She dares to wear pants," one woman had said, shaking her head. Another man had muttered something about disrespecting tradition. The words were heavy, but Amira refused to let them change her. She loved the feel of her pants, the sense of freedom they gave her, even if the villagers did not understand. As she approached the stream, she noticed the water glimmering in the morning light. She set her jug down and knelt to scoop water, letting her fingers trail through the cool, flowing current. For a moment, everything else disappeared, the gossip, the rules, the tension. It was just her and the stream, the soft murmur of the water, the rustle of leaves in the wind. She allowed herself a small smile, a secret joy that no one could take away. But the moment of peace did not last. A group of villagers appeared at the far end of the path, their voices sharp and hurried. Amira recognized them instantly, older women who took it upon themselves to enforce the rules, men who prided themselves on keeping tradition unbroken. They stopped abruptly when they saw her, eyes narrowing. One of them, a tall woman named Layla, stepped forward, her hands on her hips. "Amira," she called, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Why do you wear pants? Don't you know it is not proper for a girl?" Amira's heart sank, but she did not falter. She stood, gripping her water jug tightly, and faced them. "I wear them because they are comfortable," she said softly but firmly. "Because I can move freely. I do not mean any disrespect." The elders exchanged glances, their faces hardening. "Respect is not about comfort," Layla said sharply. "It is about following the rules. You dishonor your family and our village by dressing like this." Amira felt a shiver run down her spine. She had expected disapproval, but not the anger in their voices. A crowd had gathered, watching in silence, curiosity and judgment mixed on their faces. She could see the tension building, the weight of tradition pressing down on her small shoulders. Her freedom felt fragile, as if it could shatter with a single word. She knelt back to fill her jug, trying to appear busy, hoping to avoid further confrontation. But it was no use. The words came faster now, accusations and warnings hurled like stones. "You are bringing shame," one man said. "Your parents will be punished if you continue like this," another added. Amira's mother appeared at the edge of the crowd, her face pale and anxious. She tried to speak, to defend her daughter, but the voices of the elders drowned her out. Amira felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had always been taught to be brave, to stand for herself even in the face of danger. Yet in this moment, she realized bravery could be heavy, and the cost could be greater than she imagined. The villagers did not just see Pants. They saw defiance, a challenge to every rule they held dear. And for that, Amira would soon learn they were willing to go to extreme lengths. By evening, the tension had escalated to a point Amira had never seen before. Her parents, under pressure from the elders, called her into the small courtyard of their home. Her father's face was drawn, worry etched into every line, while her mother's hands shook. They spoke in hushed tones, words that cut deeper than the shouts of the villagers. "Amira," her father said, voice heavy with sorrow, "we cannot protect you anymore. The elders say it is disgraceful. They say you must be punished." Amira's stomach tightened. Punished. She had been careful, tried to obey in small ways, but it was never enough. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Her mother shook her head, tears falling freely. "It is not enough for you to change. They want you gone. They say it is the only way to keep our family safe." The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Amira did not fully understand at first, but as her parents explained, she realized the truth. She had been sold. Sold to someone far away, someone she had never met, to pay off debts and appease the village elders. The very people who had laughed at her as a child, who had once praised her for helping around the house, had agreed that her life could be traded like property. Amira sank to the ground, her legs trembling. Her pants felt heavier than ever, a symbol not of freedom now, but of the consequences of being herself. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but she was trapped in the harsh reality of her world. The small courtyard, which had always felt like a safe place, now felt like a cage. Her parents could only watch, grief and guilt written across their faces. They had tried to protect her, to reason with the elders, but in the end they had been powerless. Amira's heart ached, a mix of anger, fear and sorrow. She had never felt so alone, so small in a world that demanded conformity. That night she lay on the thin mat in her room, staring at the ceiling as tears streaked her face. She thought of the stream where she had felt freedom, of the morning air, of the small joys that once seemed limitless. Now they seemed distant, almost unreal. She clutched her tunic and pants tightly, as if holding on to them could somehow protect her from the harsh reality. Outside, the village continued its quiet life, unaware of the heartbreak inside one small home. The fire of tradition burned fiercely, and Amira was caught in its path. Yet even in the darkness, a small part of her refused to die. She vowed silently over and over that she would not let this break her completely. She would survive. She would endure. And somehow she would find a way to be herself again. As dawn approached once more, Amira knew her life had changed forever. The road ahead would be uncertain, filled with challenges she could not yet imagine. But she had seen what freedom felt like, even for a brief moment, and that memory would carry her through the days to come. In her heart, she held on to hope, fragile but real. The world had tried to strip her of choice, but deep inside, she still dreamed of a day when she could move, run, and live freely once more. The journey from her village was long and frightening. Amira had never traveled this far from home. The horse cart rattled over uneven roads, and every bump made her stomach lurch. She kept her eyes down, her hands gripping the sides of the cart, trying to make herself invisible. Around her, the world seemed vast and unfamiliar. Trees stretched high, fields rolled endlessly, and the sky seemed bigger than anything she had seen before. Yet none of it eased the fear inside her chest. She was leaving behind the only home she had ever known, for a life she could not imagine, and the uncertainty was unbearable. When they arrived, Amira was led into a large house, much bigger than anything in her village. The walls were painted in bright colors, the floors smooth and cold under her feet. The rooms were filled with furniture she had never seen, and strange faces watched her silently. She realized quickly that she was no longer just a guest. She was now considered someone else's property, someone to follow orders and perform tasks without question. Her first days were filled with confusion and exhaustion. She learned to carry water, clean floors, cook meals, and attend to the needs of the household. Every movement was observed. A misstep, a wrong word, or a glance in the wrong direction could bring punishment. Amira felt the weight of constant eyes on her. She missed the freedom of her village, even with its harsh rules. There, at least, she had the stream, the early mornings, and the small joys that belonged only to her. She tried to find comfort wherever she could. Sometimes, when the household was busy and no one was watching, she would slip away to a small corner of the garden and touch the leaves, feeling the rough edges of nature beneath her fingers. She would close her eyes and remember the cool water of the stream in her village, the feeling of running down the path in her pants, the freedom of choice that had been ripped from her. Those moments were brief, but they reminded her that she still had a heart, a mind, and a will that could not be entirely broken. Despite the harshness, Amira's spirit did not vanish completely. She began to notice small details that reminded her of her life before captivity. The way the sunlight filtered through the windows reminded her of early mornings at home. The sound of a bird singing in the garden was like the roosters back in her village. These little things became her secret comforts, tiny threads connecting her to a world that still existed outside the walls of her new life. However, life in the house was not easy. The people she worked for were strict and unkind. Commands came sharply, and mistakes were met with harsh words or stern looks. Amira learned to move quickly and quietly, anticipating what was expected of her. She grew strong from the labor, her muscles sore but capable. Yet no matter how obedient she became, she could feel the tension in the house, the silent reminder that she belonged to no one but those who had claimed her. She was constantly aware that freedom was something she might never see again. One afternoon, as she scrubbed the floors, a small act of defiance made her heart leap. She tucked her tunic into her pants just a little higher than the overseer expected, and for a brief moment, she felt a flicker of the person she had always been. It was a tiny thing, almost invisible to the others, but it reminded her that her identity could not be erased entirely. Even in a place meant to strip her of selfhood, Amira found ways to hold on to herself. The loneliness was often the hardest part. At night, when everyone else had gone to sleep, she lay on a thin mat in a corner, listening to the creaking of the floorboards above and the distant sounds of life beyond the walls. Memories of her village came to her in vivid detail: the smell of the stream, the laughter of children, the gentle voice of her mother, and the quiet strength of her father. Tears came easily, but she let them fall. She had no one to hide them from, and crying became a small act of freedom in itself. Days turned into weeks, and Amira began to notice small changes in herself. She moved with more confidence, learned the rhythms of the household, and began to understand the routines of those around her. Though she remained a captive in the eyes of others, her mind started to reclaim some sense of control. She planned silently, thinking of ways she might regain freedom one day. She did not yet know how, but the thought of making choices for herself became a secret anchor. Amira also began to observe the people around her more closely. Some treated her with indifference, others with strictness, but there were a few who showed tiny acts of kindness. A cook would leave her an extra piece of bread when no one was watching. A stable boy would give her a gentle smile as she passed. These moments were rare, but they reminded her that there were people in the world capable of seeing her as more than property. It was a small hope, but hope was something she needed to survive. One morning, she found herself working in the kitchen when a visitor arrived. He was a tall man, dressed simply in a worn hat and boots, carrying supplies for the household. His presence was calm, not harsh or demanding like the others. He spoke politely, asking questions about the household, but his eyes were kind. Amira noticed him noticing her, not with judgment or suspicion, but with quiet curiosity. She did not understand why, but it made her heart race. Over the next days, he returned occasionally, always carrying goods, always polite. Sometimes, when the household was busy, he would ask small questions, and she would answer, her voice soft and careful. He never demanded anything, never scolded her, and slowly she began to feel a strange sense of trust. She could not explain it fully, but for the first time since leaving her village, she felt a flicker of hope that someone could see her as a person, not just a servant. Despite these small comforts, the harsh reality of her situation never left her. Amira understood that she was far from free. Every morning she woke with the knowledge that she belonged to others, that her body and her labor were not entirely her own. Yet, even in this grim reality, she found strength. She reminded herself that her mind, her thoughts, and her dreams could not be taken away. And in those dreams, she pictured a life beyond the walls of the house, a life where she could walk freely, wear what she wanted, and make choices for herself. The routine of the household became both a burden and a training ground. Amira learned to anticipate the needs of the family, to clean efficiently, to cook without complaint, and to move quickly and silently. The labor was hard, but it made her resilient. She grew strong, not only in body but in spirit. She began to understand that survival required patience, careful observation, and quiet defiance. Even as she obeyed outwardly, she nurtured a private inner world where she remained free. One day, as she swept the courtyard, she found a small notebook hidden beneath a pile of old cloth. It was filled with sketches and notes left by a previous servant. Amira began to copy the drawings, filling the pages with her own thoughts and dreams. It became a secret place where she could express herself, a refuge from the harsh words and strict orders of her captors. The notebook reminded her that even in captivity, creativity and imagination could flourish. Her work continued, but so did her quiet rebellion. When no one watched, she would roll up her sleeves, tie her hair back, and move with confidence. She would remember the stream, the path through the village, the mornings she had felt alive. These memories became her shield, protecting her from despair. Every act of small independence, every private moment of choice, reminded her that she was still Amira, the girl who wore pants because she chose to, the girl who refused to be silenced completely. Months passed, and the household began to accept her as part of its routine. She was no longer new, no longer clumsy or hesitant. She moved with grace, performed her duties efficiently, and became part of the rhythm of the house. Yet in her heart, she knew this acceptance was not freedom. It was merely a temporary reprieve, a pause in a life dictated by others. She longed for something more, someone who would see her as a person, not a possession. And then one afternoon, that someone appeared. A new visitor arrived at the house, different from the others, carrying supplies but moving with ease and calm. He spoke politely to the household staff, his voice firm but gentle. His eyes found Amira's as she worked, and for the first time she did not feel fear or shame. She felt seen. He did not judge her clothing, her appearance, or her past. Instead, he asked questions, simple questions that allowed her to answer freely. The feeling was strange, almost overwhelming. For the first time in many months, Amira felt a small spark of hope ignite within her. Perhaps, she thought, not everyone in the world would see her as less than human. Perhaps there were people who would recognize her strength, her intelligence, and her right to make choices. She did not know what the future held, but for the first time, she dared to imagine a life where her decisions mattered, where she could move freely and speak without fear. Even in captivity, Amira's heart had found a fragile light. It was not freedom, but it was something that promised it, a reminder that no matter how harsh the world might be, the human spirit could endure, adapt, and dream. And in that light, she began to plan, silently and carefully, for the day when she might once again choose her own path. Amira had grown used to the rhythm of the household. Each day was a cycle of chores, silent observation, and careful compliance. Yet no matter how much she adapted, there was always a tight knot of fear in her stomach. She had learned to move quietly, speak softly, and avoid drawing attention to herself. But even with her carefulness, there were moments when she felt her spirit bending under the weight of captivity. One morning, as she carried water to the kitchen, a familiar sound interrupted her routine. The gate at the front of the house creaked open, and the low rumble of horse hooves echoed through the courtyard. Amira paused, feeling an unexpected jolt of curiosity. Visitors were not common here, and most who came were stern, judging, and demanding. Yet something about the rhythm of the hooves, steady and calm, made her heart beat faster with a mix of hope and fear. A man dismounted, his boots kicking up dust from the courtyard. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a simple hat that shaded his eyes from the sun. His shirt was worn, his jeans faded, and his hands rough from work, but his movements were careful, deliberate, and unhurried. He carried supplies for the household, yet his presence was different from the usual visitors who treated the servants as invisible or lesser. Amira instinctively moved to the side, trying to make herself small, but her eyes followed him. He stopped in the center of the courtyard, speaking politely to the household staff, asking questions, making notes. His voice was calm, not sharp or commanding, and he treated everyone with a kind authority that was rare. Even from a distance, Amira felt a strange sense of trust forming, a feeling she had not experienced since leaving her village. Days passed, and he returned regularly, always polite, always observing quietly, never imposing. Amira began to notice him watching, not in a judgmental way, but with genuine interest. Sometimes he would catch her eye, nod politely, and continue with his work. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight she could not ignore. In a world that constantly reminded her she had no choice, this man treated her as though she had one. One afternoon, when the household was unusually busy, he spoke to her directly. "You there?" he said, his voice steady but gentle. "What is your name?" Amira froze, unsure how to respond. Her heart raced, and for a moment she worried about speaking at all. But something in his tone, in the calmness of his eyes, made her take a small breath. "Amira," she said softly. "Amira," he repeated, as if savoring the sound. "Do you have a choice here, or are you only doing what is expected?" The question startled her. She had not been asked such a thing in months, perhaps ever. She hesitated, her mind racing. I do what I must," she said finally, her voice uncertain. He nodded, as if understanding far more than her words conveyed. "You deserve more than must. You deserve to choose." Those words hung in the air, unfamiliar and powerful. Amira had been denied choice for so long that the concept felt almost impossible. Yet, for the first time in months, she imagined a life where she could make her own decisions. The thought both exhilarated and terrified her. Could someone truly offer freedom? Could she believe it after everything she had endured? The man, whose name she learned was Jack, continued to visit over the next several days. Each time he spoke to her, asked questions, and listened patiently. He never demanded obedience or submission, and he never treated her as less than human. Slowly, Amira began to trust him, not completely, not yet, but enough to let herself imagine a future beyond the walls of the household. Despite this growing hope, the reality of her captivity remained. The household staff still treated her as property, and the work was exhausting. She could not ignore the fear that had become a constant companion, fear of punishment, fear of failure, fear that the life she dreamed of would never come. There were nights when she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was foolish to trust anyone, wondering if the spark of hope she felt was nothing more than a cruel trick her heart played on her. Then came the breaking point. One evening, the master of the house returned unexpectedly. He was in a foul mood, and every minor mistake Amira made was met with anger. Her hands trembled as she scrubbed the floors, her body aching from the long day, but she dared not stop. The words of the master cut deeper than the scrubbing brush ever could. "Careless, you are worthless if you cannot follow simple instructions," he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. Amira felt tears sting her eyes, but she held them back. She had endured much, but this moment, more than any before, made her question whether she could survive this life. Her spirit, which had held steady for months, wavered. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but she was trapped, and every instinct told her that fighting would only bring worse punishment. It was then that Jack appeared, almost as if sensing her distress. He did not confront the master directly, for he knew that would only make things worse. Instead, he approached Amira quietly, standing beside her without drawing attention. "Breathe," he said softly. "You are stronger than you think, and you do not have to stay here forever." Amira glanced at him, unsure if she could trust the words. Yet the calm in his eyes, the firmness of his presence, gave her a small thread to hold onto. For the first time in many months, she realized that help was possible, not a distant dream, but something tangible, offered by someone who truly saw her. Over the following days, Jack's visits became more meaningful. He spoke of the world beyond the walls, of towns and people, of choices and freedom. He asked her opinions, her thoughts, and listened with patience. Amira began to speak more, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. She realized that she could have a voice, that her mind and heart mattered. This was a feeling she had not experienced in a long time, perhaps never before. Yet the fear did not disappear. Every interaction with Jack reminded her of the risks she faced. What if the household discovered their connection? What if she was punished for daring to dream? Amira struggled with these thoughts constantly, walking a delicate line between hope and caution. She could feel the walls closing in, and the tension of her daily life became almost unbearable. One day, Jack spoke directly about the possibility of leaving. "Amira," he said, "you do not have to stay here. You can make a choice. You can leave this place and decide your own path." The words were like a storm inside her. Her mind raced, caught between fear and longing. Leaving meant stepping into the unknown, facing dangers she could not imagine. Yet staying meant surrendering her spirit completely. The choice weighed heavily on her, more than anything she had ever faced. Amira spent the night awake, turning the decision over in her mind. She thought of the stream in her village, of running freely, of the mornings when she could breathe without fear. She thought of Jack, who treated her with respect and kindness, who offered a glimpse of a life where she could be herself. And she thought of the household, with its harsh rules and constant reminders that she belonged to no one but them. By morning, she had made a decision. She would take the chance, however uncertain it was. She would step into the unknown, and for the first time she would choose for herself. The thought both terrified and thrilled her. She felt a rush of adrenaline, a surge of hope, and a quiet strength she had not realized she possessed. When Jack arrived that day, she met him in the courtyard. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, though her heart raced. I want to leave," she said, the words tasting strange but liberating. "I want to choose my own path." Jack nodded, a small smile on his face, his eyes filled with reassurance. "Then we will go," he said simply. "With me you choose." For the first time in months, Amira felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had faced the hardest part, not just the captivity, but the fear that had kept her from believing in freedom. And now, with the offer of choice and the presence of someone who truly saw her, she felt a spark of courage ignite within her. The preparations were quiet, careful, and deliberate. Jack arranged for supplies, guided her through the steps, and reminded her to move cautiously. Amira followed, her mind a swirl of fear, hope, and anticipation. She felt the tension in her chest, the pulse of uncertainty, but also the thrill of taking control of her own life. For the first time in many months, she was not just surviving, she was planning a future that she would shape with her own hands. As they prepared to leave the house, Amira paused for a moment. She looked back at the walls, the courtyard, the rooms that had been both her prison and her training ground. A mix of emotions filled her: fear, relief, sadness, and determination. She had endured, learned, and grown stronger. And now she was stepping into the unknown, carrying with her the lessons of her captivity and the hope of a life where she could finally choose. And with that, she stepped forward beside Jack, ready to embrace a future she had not dared to imagine until this very moment. Amira's heart raced as she stepped out of the heavy wooden gate, the sunlight hitting her face like a promise. The world felt enormous and unfamiliar, yet somehow alive and welcoming. She could smell fresh air, grass, and distant fields, all scents that had been hidden from her in the walls of the household. She walked beside Jack, who gave her a small nod, reassuring her that she was not alone. For the first time in months, maybe even years, she felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. The first steps were the hardest. Every sound, every movement, every shadow felt like it might contain danger. Her mind kept running back to the household, the sharp voices, the constant watch, the endless chores. She thought of the other servants who had accepted their fate, who had bent themselves into quiet obedience. Amira did not want that life. She had survived their rules, their punishments, and their disdain. And now she had the chance to live her own life, to make choices for herself. Jack guided her along a narrow path through fields and low hills. The rhythm of walking, the sway of the horse as he led it beside her, gave her a strange sense of comfort. She asked questions quietly about where they were going, about what lay ahead, about the people they might meet. Jack answered patiently, never rushing her, never pushing her to speak before she was ready. For Amira, this was a new experience. No one had asked her opinion, no one had considered her feelings for months, and now someone was listening. As they traveled, the landscape slowly changed. The familiar dust and stone of her village gave way to rolling fields, small streams, and clusters of trees. Amira's heart lifted with every mile, each new sight a small reminder that the world was bigger than the walls she had been confined in. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The unknown could be dangerous, but it could also be beautiful. For the first time, she felt like she could belong somewhere entirely by choice, not because someone else decided where she should be. During their journey, Jack taught her small survival skills. How to find water, how to notice safe paths, and how to care for the horse they traveled with. Amira absorbed every detail eagerly. She realized that freedom did not come without responsibility, but she also understood that responsibility could be liberating. She could make decisions, correct mistakes, and plan her own path. Every skill she learned, every new step she took, strengthened her confidence. She was no longer just a captive. She was a traveler, a thinker, a person with her own agency. At night, they camped under the stars. Amira had never seen the sky stretch so endlessly, so full of possibilities. The constellations were unfamiliar, but they felt like friends, silent witnesses to her journey. She lay on a simple blanket, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, feeling the quiet strength of the earth beneath her. Jack tended the small fire, spoke little, but his calm presence was enough. For the first time in months, Amira felt safe without being confined. During one evening by the fire, she spoke to Jack more openly than ever before. "I never thought I would have a choice," she admitted softly, her voice trembling slightly. "All my life I was told what to wear, where to go, what to say. And now I feel like I can decide for myself." Jack nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Choice is the most important gift anyone can give or receive, and you deserve it, Amira. You have earned it by being brave and enduring what most could not. Now you get to live for yourself." Her heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude, relief, and awe. She thought of the girl who had been sold for wearing pants, the girl who had endured months of captivity, fear, and hard labor. That girl was still there, stronger now, wiser, and ready to embrace life fully. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Amira felt she could face whatever came next. As the days passed, they encountered small villages and towns. Amira observed people walking freely, children laughing in the streets, women choosing clothes and moving without fear. Each sight made her smile quietly, imagining what it would be like to live among them. She began to plan for her future, not in vague dreams but in small, practical steps. She wanted a home, a community, work she could choose, and clothes she could pick without judgment. Each plan was a declaration of independence, a refusal to return to a life where she had no control. Jack, noticing her growing confidence, encouraged her gently. "You can decide where we stop, what we do, and how fast we go. You are in charge of your life now," he reminded her. And slowly, Amira began to make small decisions on the journey, when to rest, which paths to take, how to manage the horse. Each choice, each small act of control, strengthened her sense of freedom. Along the way, they faced natural challenges, steep hills, muddy paths, and sudden storms. But Amira met each one with courage. She learned to balance on slippery slopes, to shield herself from cold rain, and to tend the fire carefully. Every obstacle she overcame felt like a reclaiming of her own strength. She was learning that freedom required effort, patience, and resilience, but it also rewarded her with autonomy and self-respect. One evening, as they camped near a river, Amira reflected on her life. She thought of the village where she had been sold, the days of fear and labor, the nights of loneliness and uncertainty. And she thought of Jack, the man who had offered her not just safety but respect, kindness, and the chance to choose. She realized that while the past had shaped her, it did not define her. She could carry the lessons, the memories, and even the pain forward, but she would not let them control her future. The river sparkled under the moonlight, and Amira felt a deep sense of peace. She was no longer bound by walls, orders, or fear. She had her mind, her heart, and her body, all hers to direct. And she knew that the road ahead, though uncertain, would be hers to shape. The thought made her chest swell with anticipation. For the first time, she could truly imagine being free in every sense. As they traveled further, Jack spoke of towns where she could start fresh, places where people respected freedom and individuality. He promised nothing would be forced upon her, that she would meet people who would honor her choices. Amira listened eagerly, planning silently which town might be her new home. She imagined a small house with a garden, a kitchen of her own, and space to walk freely without judgment. The visions fueled her determination to reach that life. One morning, as they approached a bustling town, Amira felt both excitement and nervousness. The streets were full of people, moving freely, laughing, and talking. Shops displayed colorful clothing, and the air was filled with smells of fresh bread and flowers. She felt a surge of joy and disbelief. She had dreamed of freedom for so long that seeing it in reality almost overwhelmed her. Jack smiled at her, noticing her awe. "This is your choice now," he said. "Wherever you go, whatever you do, it is yours to decide. You are no longer bound by anyone else's rules." Amira nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She realized she had arrived not just in a new place, but in a new life. She could walk through the streets, choose her clothes, speak to strangers, and make decisions without fear of punishment or judgment. She could finally live as herself, fully and completely. In the days that followed, Amira found a small home in the town. She met kind neighbors, learned local trades, and slowly built a life where her voice mattered. She could wear pants or skirts, walk freely, and choose her companions and friends. The sense of control over her life, once denied, became a constant source of strength and joy. She often thought of Jack, grateful for his patience, kindness, and the respect he had shown her. Without him, she might never have dared to believe that freedom and choice were possible. Yet she knew that the real work had been hers, the courage to trust, to hope, and to take the first step into the unknown. She had earned her independence, and every day she cherished it. Amira walked through the town market one sunny morning, the wind brushing her hair, the sun warming her face. She smiled as children ran past, women chose fabrics freely, and men moved through their day without judgment. The world seemed vibrant, alive, and welcoming. And for the first time in her life, Amira felt completely free. She had survived fear, captivity, and uncertainty, and now she was living a life she had chosen. Her past, though painful, had not defeated her. It had shaped her, strengthened her, and made her resilient. Her future was now hers to create, filled with the promise of choice, freedom, and the joy of being herself. And as she walked confidently through the streets, Amira knew that she would never again allow anyone to dictate her life. In that moment, she understood the true power of freedom, not just to move, speak, or dress as one wishes, but to make choices, to shape one's own destiny, and to live fully as oneself. And with that understanding, Amira smiled, feeling a sense of peace and hope she had never known before.